Howdy! Exam 2 is in the books. I actually had it all graded by Friday, but then I had to put them all on the online web page, and then, well, I want to make this video first. I didn't want to give it back to you and you not already have this video to answer any questions you had. And let's see, so I'll remind you how I do it. When you upload your exam to the web page, it assigns a random number to your exam. So then I download each exam. Like if you're user number 3, I rename your file user 03, and then I grade all those. And I don't know. I still haven't hit publish on all the numbers, so I still have no idea who got what grade. Because it won't tell me. I mean, when I said I wanted to grade these anonymously, it will not tell me the grades until I have already put them in the grade book and said this is the grade. However, I can tell you this. These are the grades on exam 2. 3 A's, 9 B's, 4 C's, 2 D's, and an F. Compared to exam 1, 2, 2, 5, 3, 8. So I think I worked it out. All right, so let me tell you what I did on this exam to make it, I thought, a more accurate, a better means of testing, all right? Let's see, now I've got 1, okay, sorry. Let's see here. Can you see that part? Yeah. 1, A, B, C, D, E, and then 2, A, B, C, D, E, F, I believe it was. Is that right? John Harvey. Oh, G. G. All right, and this is how much each question was worth. All right, so 0.75, 0.75, 0.75. What about D there, John? 1.75 and 2. And then we've got 1, 1, 1, 1. Yeah, all the way down to here. 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1. So let's see what that adds up to. That's 1.5, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yes, that's what the exam was supposed to be out of. All right. So this is what I decided to do differently on this exam. And that was to ask you some questions that all you got to do is look at your notes and figure it out. I mean, not only that, but I also told you what the exact topics of the questions was going to be. And so presumably you would have studied this a great deal, and in answering the easy ones, all you got to do is look it up. For example, what was 1A? This was the one on the Austrian business cycle theory. Whose fault is it that there ends up being a recession? The government or the central bank or whatever. I mean, that should be a very, very easy 0.75 points. If people become more reluctant to save money, what will interest rates do? Rise. All right. So just look up in the original answer. What eventually happens to causes the government to decide to raise interest rates? Well, when they switch gears, it's because of inflation. All right. So there's the answer to the first 3. But this is the point I want to make. I viewed these points as free. I'm giving those away. All right. And then on the next one, I never took off more than 0.75 unless you left it blank. So, oops, sorry. I'm giving away a free point. I never took off more than 1 unless you left it blank, another free point. So the D and E were hard. All right, D and E were asking you to break it down and think about comparing the post-Keynesian and the Austrian views. If you had, well, let's do the whole test first. All right, then on these, that was easy, easy, easy. I'll go back through those in a minute. D. Yeah, and D. All right, and then it starts to get hard. All right, just like on the other one. But I wasn't going to take off any more than a half unless you left it blank. 1.25. Wasn't going to take off any more than 0.75. And I wasn't going to take off any more than 0.75. Okay, check this out then. Anybody who has kept up with the material, who has outlined each of the chapters, who has written out the notes from class or from the YouTube videos, whichever one, should have gotten these, either the questions circled in red or the extra points over here that I've written out there because I never took that much off. Those were free. All right, now what did that add up to? All right, so we got 1.5, 2.25, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.25, 8.75, 9, 10, 11.25. Is that right? Yep, that's right. 11.25 out of 15 points were free. All right, that adds up to a 75%. So, what I was doing on the exam was, and this is similar to what I do in a regular semester. I don't know why I didn't think, well, I'll tell you exactly why I didn't think to do it in just a moment. But basically what I did was I built into the exam, hey, if you worked hard and studied, then you ought to get these points right here, all right? So you ought to get a middle C at least, all right? And then if you also figure out this clever stuff over here, you can get an A or a B. So again, and I got this all plotted out here on the exam. I wrote out, hey, it wasn't until I was actually getting ready to grade it that I thought to myself, that's how I ought to do it. And let me tell you why I didn't do exam 1 that way. I was under the assumption that if I just gave away whose fault was it, it was the government. And what was the next one? Let's see. Oh yeah, what will interest rates do if people become more reluctant to save? They'll go up and so forth. I figured everybody would get that right. I figured that's a extremely unchallenging exam. All right, and I thought now during regular semester, I might ask those things because it's not open book, open note. But with open book, open note, all the stuff I've got circled up here, I figured those are just giveaways. All right, open book, open note. Apparently not, because we still had several D's and F's, not nearly as many. But I learned on exam 1 that the people who slack off in the regular semester, well, they do the same thing on the, when it's open book, open note. So I can afford to, in my mind, give away free points. So that's what I did. That was sort of the basic structure of the exam. And boy, I felt a lot better about the way it was set up. Again, if you had outlined the chapters and had studied the Austrian business cycle theory, the 3 labor markets, and you had thought about the fact I already told you that the post-Keynesians, there are going to be questions where the post-Keynesians are going to be disagreeing with the Austrian business cycle theory, then that should have been a lot of free points right there. All right, and it was. Grades much better, and I'm comfortable with this right here. I wasn't comfortable with this, that's why I gave you some points. I am comfortable with this, and I think it was a much better test, and we'll be doing the final this way too. All right, so 1A. Let me set this down over here where I can see it. There's my key, and let's see. Let me turn my monitor a little bit this way so I can see what you can see. All right, so here was the exam, right? Now, first of all, for God's sake, please send it to me in Word. I can't tell you how long it took me, anonymous student number 12, I still don't know who you are, to screw around trying to translate it from Pages, and then when you did send it later, you send it as a PDF. I said an email, send it to me as a Word document. Anyway, like I said, I screwed around trying to get that done. I ended up just emailing Dr. Scott in political science, said, hey, can you translate this for me? So he did it for me, yeah. So that's to the top there, the instructions. Whose fault is it that there ends up being a recession? The government, bastards. If people become more reluctant to save money, what will interest rates do? They will go up. What eventually causes the government to decide to raise interest rates after they initially decided to lower them, and that is, of course, the inflation. A lot of good answers there. And likewise on D and E, a lot of really good answers. Recall this business cycle, banks earn income by loaning out people's savings. What would post-Keynesians say about this? All right, let's see, what have I got down here in my notes? Well, people took one of 2 routes. That got all the points. Either they said, well, that's not true because banks could just make up money out of thin air, all right? Or they said, well, yeah, they can loan out people's savings if they want to, but really that's not that big a deal. That the big thing is that the money supply is endogenous, all right? And so the money is created through the process of making the loan. So we don't need to have somebody else's savings. And then the last one, I think this is probably the best of the difficult questions in terms of how people did. Banks can only convince people to save by offering interest. A number of excellent responses saying no. fundamental uncertainty is why people save. The interest rates may change how you save. You didn't need to say that part. But what you did need to say was they don't need any convincing. They don't need interest in order to be convinced to save. All right, so that was all the stuff under number 1. Now, on number 2, this was all labor market stuff. Which labor market graph assumed there was an automatic mechanism that would try to restore full employment? And I put try in there on purpose to make sure that I didn't want it to say that would restore full employment. Because the correct answer, there's 2 there. It's the classical and the neoclassical Keynesian. They both make that assumption. Now, the neoclassical Keynesian, the mechanism is obstructed, but it's still there. And so half a point each on those 2. Half a point each on those 2. Then, which labor market graphs concluded we may need government intervention? That's going to be your neoclassical Keynesian and your post-Keynesian. All right. Which one assumed that that wages were downwardly rigid? That's just the neoclassical Keynesian. And then I was really proud of this one here. Which one assumed that the involuntarily unemployed are unhappy? All 3. All 3 assumed they'd be unhappy, right? That wasn't the point. The point was that only in the classical one would they be free to act on their unhappiness in a way that then created full employment. Okay, so those were all pretty easy. All right, E. Here, this is the first place where people really sort of ran into a problem here on the exam, because as you can see, there were tons of really good grades. What would be the unique feature of a labor market diagram where workers are willing to work at any wage? All right, let's have a look at that. Turns out I already know the answer, but let's pretend I don't. Erase all this. And what do I want here? Okay. Employment, wage rate. All right. Let's say this is our total number of workers, and they're willing to work at this wage rate. But they're also willing to work at this wage rate. But they're also willing to work at this wage rate. What we get is a vertical labor supply curve. A vertical labor supply curve indicates that workers are willing to work at any wage rate, all right? So that was the correct answer to that part, and as I just erased it, but what I had down there was that it was worth a point, and I never took off more than half a point unless you left it blank. There were some tests where things were just left blank. All right, so now you're going to answer the next 2 on the basis of that. If workers are willing to work at any wage rate, there would never be any unemployment from the perspective of the classical model. Let's have a look. You didn't have to do this. You just had to answer it, but presumably you sketched it out on a sheet of paper somewhere to think about it. N, W, N, S, N, D. And in order to find out if this works or not, we need to start with a situation of involuntary unemployment. So we've got N sub 1 people willing to work, N sub 0 people can find a job right now, but of course they're going to compete with each other and drive wages down to here. So no, I'm sorry, yes, it is true that if people were willing to work at any wage, there would never be any involuntary unemployment. But that was always true in the classical model. That was never in question, all right? That was never an issue in the classical model. But the last question on the exam says, all right, what about the same question from the perspective of the post-Keynesian? And there were some excellent answers on here that answered in a way that I wasn't even thinking that to word it this way. And I thought it was really well done. Same deal. W sub 0. So we've got N sub 0 with jobs and N sub 1 who are would like to work. We're stuck. All right. Same situation as before. Yes, they would like to, they would like to offer to work for less, but firms aren't hiring. Remember, that's the key with the post-Keynesian one. Like, well, yeah, I mean, during the Great Depression, which people brought up. There were some really nice answers on this. People brought up, well, geez, during the Great Depression, people would have worked for darn near anything, all right? But they still didn't get jobs. And as a couple of people said, in the post-Keynesian model, the labor market is limited by the demand side, and that is exactly right. It is limited by the demand side, by labor demand, all right? So firms will get all the workers they want, and it doesn't matter that they're willing to work for less. They can go offer to work for less. To whom? Because there's nobody that's actually hiring right now. And I forgot to mention, on F, I wasn't taking off any more than 0.75, and likewise on G, 0.75. So that gave you a free 1.25 on each of them. But again, very good answers. So that was really good. So there's no need to curve anything this time, and I've got it worked out. All right, I've got the system worked out for how I should be testing from now on. I'm really pleased about that. I guess in closing, just a couple of things. So let's see where we are. Let's see. There's a what do you call those things? Reflection due pretty soon, all right? Don't forget, free point. People with the lowest grades in the class, also the ones that haven't bothered to turn in reflections. I mean, it's awfully hard to do anything about that. You know, there were free points just laying there on the table. You didn't take them. So far, we've had 6 quizzes, each worth 5 points. We've had 2 exams. And then we've had 3 reflections, right? 3 times 1. So we're at 63. Ergo, 47 left. Where do those 37 left. Where do those 37 come from? Turns out I happen to know the answer to that. The final is 20 points. I think that's right. The 3 quizzes we have left are 5 each. Yeah, that must be right. And the 2 reflections. And there's the last 37. All right. So we're 2/3 of the way through. Yeah, that's it. I don't believe, I should have looked again, but I'm virtually certain that the next quiz isn't this week. It's going to be next week, and it's back to Tuesdays. Is that right? Oh, well, it's on the calendar. It's all on the calendar right there. That's it. Good work. And when I get this converted to a form that will be acceptable to YouTube, I will then upload it, and then I will hit the button that says publish, and you'll get your grades. And I'm now about to do the exact same talk, but for international monetary. Pardon me.